We lived in a storage unit until a stranger's note changed everything. My name's Jake, and if you told me a year ago I'd be sitting here writing this story, I'd have laughed you right out of the room. Not because things were going great back then. They weren't. But because I didn't think anyone would ever care to hear what a kid from a falling-apart town had to say. We grew up in a small Ohio town that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Empty stores, broken sidewalks, and people just trying to make it day by day. That was us. Me, my little sister Emily, and my mom. We didn't have a lot. Most nights, dinner was whatever was cheapest at the dollar store. But Mom always made it feel like home. She used to joke that our family was cursed. I always thought it was just her way of dealing with life, throwing bricks at us. First, my dad left when I was 6, vanished like he was never there. No calls, no letters. Just one day gone. Leaving Mom to figure out how to raise 2 kids on her own. Then the house fire happened. That was the first real punch in the gut. I was 12. One faulty space heater, and poof, half our place burned. The fire didn't take everything, but the insurance company sure made it feel that way. We had to move into a small rental that smelled like mildew and had a front door that didn't quite shut all the way. Fast forward to last year. I had just turned 17 and was working part-time at the gas station after school. Emily was in middle school, already way too smart for her age, and always asking questions we couldn't afford answers to. Like, why do other kids go on vacation? Or, how come our fridge is always half empty? That week started off normal. I remember because it was cold, real cold, and our heat was out again. Mom had just come back from the grocery store, trying to stretch $40 into a full week of food. She was tired, like always, but smiled through it. She always did. But that night, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of her crying in the kitchen. I'd heard it before, soft, quiet cries late at night when she thought we were asleep, but this time it was different. It was the kind of crying that breaks something inside you just hearing it. I walked out and found her sitting at the table, holding a letter. "What is it?" I asked, still groggy. She didn't answer at first. Then she just slid the letter across the table. It was a notice from the landlord. We had 2 weeks to vacate. He was selling the place. No warning, no chance to fight it. We were being kicked out. Just like that. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. The next day, she skipped work. That scared me more than anything. My mom never skipped work. Ever. She cleaned houses for a living, always taking whatever job she could find. But that day, she sat in the same chair, staring at the wall like someone had flipped a switch and turned the light off inside her. We tried calling local shelters, but they were full. The church offered food, but no place to stay. It was like every door was locked and every window was nailed shut. That's when the idea of the storage unit came up. It was Mom's last option. She had a friend who worked at one of those 24-hour storage facilities. Said she could let us use one of the larger units, just for a while, just until we figured something out. So we packed our things, what little we had, and moved into a metal box behind a chain-link fence. It was colder than any place I'd ever been. We had a couple of blankets, a blow-up mattress, and our clothes in trash bags. We tried to make it seem like an adventure for Emily's sake, like we were camping. But she wasn't stupid. She saw through the smiles. I kept going to school, tried to act like everything was fine, but it wasn't. I was always tired, always hungry, and always angry. Angry at the system. Angry at Dad. Angry at whatever cruel force had decided our lives were a joke. Then one day, during third period, the school counselor pulled me aside. Said someone had made an anonymous tip that we were living in an unsafe situation. I froze. I didn't know what to say. Deny it? Tell the truth? Either way, it felt like I was about to lose everything. They brought in CPS. They asked questions. A lot of them. I tried to protect Mom. Told them we were staying with friends. But they already knew. They had pictures of the storage unit. Someone had ratted us out. I didn't know who. Maybe the storage lady. Maybe a teacher. But it didn't matter. Damage was done. They told Mom she had 48 hours to find proper housing, or they'd take Emily. That was the moment I saw something in my mom's eyes I hadn't seen before. Desperation. She made calls. Called every cousin, old friend, even her estranged sister in Chicago. Nobody wanted to take us in. Either they didn't have the room, or they just didn't want the hassle. That's when I decided to go to the one person I never thought I'd see again. My dad. I'd found his name once on an old envelope when I was 15. Traced it to a town about 2 hours away. Back then, I told myself I didn't need him. But now? Now I was desperate, too. I borrowed a friend's car and drove out there. I didn't even know what I was going to say. I just showed up at his auto shop. Turns out he was running a small garage. When he saw me, he didn't even recognize me at first. "Jake," he finally said, wiping his hands on a rack. "You're tall." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just said, "We need help." And for a split second, I saw something in his face, maybe guilt, maybe regret, or maybe it was just surprise that I hadn't punched him right then and there. But what he said next flipped everything on its head. He looked around like he wasn't sure anyone else should hear what came next. "I've got a spare room above the shop," he said finally. "It ain't fancy, but if you and your sister need a place, you can stay there for a while." I stood there, stunned. I thought I'd have to beg, argue, maybe even sleep in the car outside until he gave in. But there he was offering help like it was no big deal. Like he hadn't disappeared for 10 years. I didn't trust it. Not completely. But I nodded. because we didn't have a choice. That night, we moved in. Mom stayed back in town. She said she had leads on work and didn't want to slow us down. I think she just didn't want to face him. Can't blame her. The apartment above the shop was dusty, smelled like oil and old tools, but it was warm. It had real walls, a bed, running water. For Emily, it felt like a hotel. For me, it felt like a ticking time bomb. Dad didn't talk much. He gave us space, made awkward small talk in the mornings. He wasn't cruel, just distant, like he didn't know how to be around us. I caught him staring at Emily sometimes, like he was trying to figure out who she was. It made me uncomfortable, but I let it go. A few weeks passed. School became easier. I didn't have to lie anymore. I could focus. Emily started smiling more. And for the first time in a long time, we had leftovers. Then things got weird. One night, I came home from work at the gas station, and the apartment door was unlocked. I always locked it before I left. I walked in, heart racing, and found my dad sitting on the couch, flipping through one of Mom's old photo albums. I didn't even know he had it. He looked up and said, "She used to talk about taking you both to California." "Yeah," I replied cautiously. "Never happened though." He closed the album slowly. "She was always too scared to leave." I didn't say anything. Then he said something that still makes my stomach turn. "I never stopped caring, you know. I just couldn't handle being a father." I almost laughed. Out loud. Like it was some kind of excuse. "You couldn't handle it?" I said. "So you just vanished?" He didn't argue. Just nodded. I was a mess back then. Still kind of am. That night, I called Mom. Told her what he said. She was quiet on the other end. Then she said, "He always had the words, Jake. He just never had the actions." That stuck with me. And then, just as we were starting to settle into this weird version of life, the bottom dropped out again. Emily got sick. At first, we thought it was just the flu. She was tired, pale, not eating much. But then she fainted at school. I rushed to the hospital. They ran tests. More tests. Doctors came in with serious faces. Diagnosis: leukemia. I didn't even know what to say. I sat in that sterile white room while they explained it all to me: chemo, hospital stays, bone marrow tests. I felt like I was underwater, hearing muffled words I couldn't process. Dad showed up, to his credit. Paid for the first few appointments. Said he'd do what he could. But I could tell he was already pulling away again, like the weight of it was too much. Mom finally came to the hospital. When she saw Emily in that bed, hooked up to machines, something in her cracked. I could see it in her face. Years of exhaustion, fear, guilt, all breaking through at once. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, "You're not a kid anymore, Jake. You've been holding this family together." I'm so sorry. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. I just wanted Emily to get better. Over the next month, we practically lived at the hospital. Bills piled up. Dad stopped calling. Eventually, he just disappeared again. Surprise. We sold what little we had. My school let me take classes online so I could work more. Mom went back to cleaning houses even though her back was giving out. And still, it wasn't enough. Then came a knock at the door that would change everything. A nurse handed us a note, written on cheap paper. It said, "There's someone willing to pay for the treatment. Full cost. No strings attached." We thought it was a scam. Too good to be true. But it was real. The hospital confirmed it. The entire treatment plan covered. I asked 100 questions. Who? Why? What did they want in return? No one knew. Or at least, no one would say. That night, I got an email from a private account. No name. Just one line. "Your mom helped me once. Now it's my turn." I read it 10 times. I showed Mom. She stared at the screen, completely still. Then she whispered, "It can't be." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. Just said, "Some debts don't get paid in dollars, Jake." I didn't push her for more. Something in her voice told me not to. Maybe it was the way she looked at that screen, like a ghost from her past had just walked through the door. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready. If she was ever ready. Meanwhile, Emily started her treatments. The first few weeks were brutal. She lost her hair, threw up constantly, and looked smaller every time I saw her. But she never stopped smiling when I walked in the room. Never once complained. Even when her arms were full of IVs and she couldn't sit up by herself. She was stronger than all of us. Mom practically lived in that hospital room. She quit her last cleaning job because she couldn't stand being away from Emily. I tried to pick up extra shifts, but between work, online school, and sleeping in waiting rooms, I felt like I was on the verge of collapsing every single day. One night, after visiting hours ended, I went outside to sit on the bench near the parking lot. I was just staring at nothing when a man walked up, mid-50s, gray beard, long coat, holding 2 coffees. "You Jake?" he asked. I froze. "Yeah, who's asking?" He handed me one of the coffees. "A friend of your mom's. She helped me a long time ago, back when she didn't have to." I just stared at him, not sure what to say. She gave me a coat in a snowstorm. I was living under a bridge. Didn't know if I was going to make it through the night. She didn't just hand me the coat, she sat with me. Brought soup. Stayed until the ambulance came. That didn't sound like a big deal. But the way he said it, like it saved his life. Years later, I got back on my feet. Started a business. Did all right. Heard about you through a nurse I know. I didn't even know what to say. I must have looked like I'd just seen a ghost. He nodded at me. "Tell her the debt's paid. And tell Emily. Keep fighting. Then he walked off. I ran inside and told Mom. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She just nodded like it all made sense now. That was the kind of woman she was. She helped people and never expected anything in return. But sometimes, kindness circles back when you least expect it. Emily's treatment stretched on for months. It was rough, but it started working. The cancer markers went down. The doctors smiled more during rounds. She gained weight, her laughter came back, and eventually, she started walking the halls again. It was like watching a miracle unfold, one slow day at a time. Then something happened I never expected. The school offered me a scholarship. I didn't apply. Didn't even know such a thing existed. But one of my teachers had nominated me, said I was the most resilient student they'd ever met. It wasn't for a fancy college, just the local community one. But still, full ride. Only problem? It started in 3 months. And it was full-time, which meant no job. I was torn. I wanted to go. I really did. But with bills still coming in, with Mom exhausted and Emily still needing care, I didn't know how I could leave them hanging. I told Mom I was going to decline. She didn't let me finish. No, she said. You're going. We'll figure everything else out. But, no, Jake. You've carried this family longer than you should have had to. Now it's your turn. I didn't argue. I just hugged her. Classes started in the fall. It was tough juggling school and everything else, but I pushed through. I was studying to become a nurse. Thought maybe I could help kids like Emily one day. The funny thing is, once I started, life didn't magically get easier. We still had tough weeks. Still had medical bills. Still had days where dinner was peanut butter on crackers. But there was hope. Real, solid hope for the first time in years. Then, just when I thought I knew where the road was heading, Mom collapsed at work. They rushed her to the ER. Heart issues, the doctor said. Probably stress, maybe something genetic. I sat in the hallway outside ICU, staring at the same walls I'd stared at when Emily was sick. I remember thinking, please, not again. I can't go through this again. She pulled through, thank God. But the doctor said she needed rest. Long term. No more overworking. No more cleaning jobs for 12 hours a day. Which meant we were right back where we started, short on money and long on problems. That night, while she was still in the hospital, I found a stack of unopened envelopes in her room. Final notices. Credit card bills. A shut-off notice from the power company. And a letter. From my dad. I hadn't heard from him in months. Not since he vanished again. But there it was. Written in shaky handwriting. Jake. I know I failed you. I failed all of you. I've spent my life running from things I should have faced head-on. But I want to make things right. I left something for you at the shop. Dad. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed not to trust him again. But I had to know. The next day, I drove back to the shop. The building looked the same, run down, quiet. I unlocked the back storage room and found a dusty cardboard box with my name written on it. Inside were 3 things. A worn-out leather journal, a deed, and a cashier's check for $9,000. I just stood there, staring at that check like it might vanish if I blinked. $9,000. It might as well have been $1 million to us. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. I kept expecting some kind of catch, a letter saying just kidding, but there was none. The deed was for the garage, my dad's auto shop. He'd signed it over to me. There was no note explaining why. Just the deed and that check, sitting quietly in a dusty box, like he wanted to disappear one last time without even saying goodbye. I took the journal back with me. That night, after Mom fell asleep in the hospital, I sat by her bed and opened it. It was full of his handwriting, entries going back years. Regrets. Memories. Apologies he never said out loud. In one entry, he wrote, I left because I didn't know how to fix things. I figured they'd be better off without me. Every day since, I've wondered if I made the biggest mistake of my life. In another, dated just a few months ago. Saw Jake at the hospital. He's stronger than I ever was. If I don't make it out of this mess I've made, I hope he knows I was proud of him. I didn't know whether to feel angry or sorry. Probably both. Maybe a little relieved too, if I'm being honest. I thought I'd never get a shred of closure from him. But somehow, that beat-up old journal gave me more than all the awkward conversations we never had. We used part of the check to pay off the urgent bills. The rest? I held on to it. I didn't want to spend it all right away. Not until I figured out how to make it count. Mom eventually came home from the hospital, weak but smiling. Emily's numbers kept improving. Slowly but surely, we were finding our footing again. And for once, we weren't constantly chasing the next disaster. That's when I made a decision. I reopened the garage, not as a mechanic shop, though we still fixed up a car or two here and there, but as a community help center. I cleaned it out, got a permit, bought a couple of second-hand couches, and started small. We handed out food boxes, gave kids a place to do homework after school, set up a coat rack where people could take or leave what they didn't need. Word spread fast. Turns out our town had more people struggling than I ever realized, folks who had been one paycheck away from losing everything, just like us. Single moms, teens with nowhere to go, elderly people choosing between groceries and medicine. It wasn't fancy, but it mattered. The same friend who'd helped me drive to see my dad months earlier helped install an old coffee machine in the corner. A local teacher volunteered to tutor kids a couple evenings a week. A neighbor donated a box of old books. And Mom? She came in a few days a week to make sandwiches and talk with folks. It gave her purpose again. gave her light. But just when it started to feel like we were finally turning a corner, another curveball hit us. Emily had a relapse. One moment she was doing better, going to school part-time, smiling again, and the next, she was back in a hospital bed with her hair falling out and her white blood cell count dropping fast. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I had to be the strong one again. The doctor pulled me aside and said the treatment this time would be even more aggressive. And more expensive. Way more. We didn't have the money. Not even close. That night, after sitting with Emily, I walked back to the garage, locked the door, and just sat there in the dark. I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers again. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. I heard. I want to help. Again. See. I stared at it for a full minute. See. I texted back. Who are you? No reply. The next morning, the hospital billing office called. Another payment had been made. Covered everything, plus a buffer for medication. I didn't know who this C was. Maybe the same man from before. Maybe someone else. But their timing was perfect. Almost too perfect. When I told Mom, she gave me this odd look and said, "Some angels don't wear wings, Jake. Some just wear scars." I still don't know exactly what that meant. But I didn't press. I started keeping a list that day of every stranger who helped us, every moment of kindness, every unexpected turn that saved us when things got darkest. It reminded me not to give up when things got hard again. Because they always would. But so would help. Weeks turned into months. Emily began to recover again, slower this time, but steadier. I kept going to school, the garage stayed open, and slowly, the pieces of our lives started fitting together in a way they never had before. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the front steps of the garage, I noticed a man across the street watching us. Tall, in a gray jacket, with a cane. He caught my eye, gave a small nod, and walked away. I never saw him again. But for some reason, I believe that was C. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. There were still days when the fridge looked empty and the mailbox was too full. But something had changed in all of us. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the belief that even when the world felt heavy, there were still people out there who cared. People who didn't need to know you to help you. Mom's health got better, slowly but surely. She still got tired easily, and I had to remind her not to overdo it at the garage, but she smiled more. Her laugh came back. And she started singing while she cooked again, even if it was just grilled cheese for dinner. Emily finally got the all clear from her doctor. No signs of cancer. I'll never forget the look on her face when she rang the bell in the pediatric ward. Every nurse clapped. Mom cried. I just stood there frozen, watching my little sister stand tall, bald, and beaming, like she'd just come back from the edge of the world. That night, we went to a cheap diner and celebrated with pancakes and root beer floats. Emily said it was the best day of her life. And for once, I agreed. I graduated community college the following spring. The whole town showed up. Not just Mom and Emily, but some of the teachers who helped me, folks from the garage, even the local church volunteers. One of the mechanics who worked with my dad came too. He gave me an envelope with a small gift and a handwritten note that said, "Your dad would have been proud." I didn't know how to feel about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe not. But I kept that note in my wallet anyway. I was offered a full scholarship to finish my nursing degree at a nearby university. Part of me wanted to turn it down again. I still felt responsible for the garage, for Mom and Emily. But they didn't even let me hesitate. "You're going," Mom said firmly. No arguments. So I went. I took classes during the week and drove home on weekends to help out and check in. Emily started high school and joined a drama club. She made friends, laughed, acted like a normal teenager again. For the first time in our lives, things weren't just better, they were stable. Until one day, about a year into nursing school, something strange happened. A woman showed up at the garage, late 30s, well-dressed, carrying a clipboard. She said her name was Angela, and she was from a nonprofit that helped struggling families with medical costs, job training, and housing. "I heard this place used to be a mechanic shop," she said, looking around. "It was," I said. "Then it became this." She smiled. "It's impressive. The community work, the outreach, you're filling a gap this town desperately needed. We've been watching from a distance." That part caught me off guard. "You've been watching?" Angela nodded. Not in a creepy way. "Someone submitted your name last year for our Quiet Heroes initiative. We spotlight people doing meaningful work in forgotten towns. People who change lives quietly." I didn't know what to say. I'd never thought of myself as a hero. Just a guy trying to keep his family from falling apart. Then she said something that floored me. "We'd like to offer you a grant, enough to expand the center, hire staff, and continue your schooling without worry." I blinked. "Is this real?" She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were the details. The amount. The timeline. Everything. Who submitted my name? She smiled again. It was anonymous. But they left a message. She pulled out a small note card. Handwritten, in neat, block letters. "For the kid who turned pain into purpose." See? That name again. See? I just sat there, trying to wrap my head around it all. That same mystery person, whoever they were, had helped us more than anyone else. And now, here they were again, changing our lives from the shadows. Angela left me her card, said I didn't have to decide right away. But I didn't need time. I signed the papers before she even made it back to her car. The expansion took months. Volunteers poured in. We added a small library, a counseling room, even a tiny food pantry. We started hosting workshops, resume writing, parenting classes, support groups. The garage became a lifeline for so many people, just like it had once been for us. One afternoon, I was locking up when I saw something taped to the front door. A small envelope with my name on it. Inside was a photo. An old one. It was my mom, maybe 20 years younger, standing in the snow, draping her coat over a homeless man. On the back of the photo were 4 words. One coat. One life. I turned around, heart pounding, but the street was empty. Still, I knew. She had been here. I stood on the sidewalk holding that photo, went whipping through the alley like it was trying to whisper something to me. I'd never met this C face to face, not really, but it felt like they were always one step ahead. Always watching. Always showing up when we needed help the most. That picture hit hard. I could see the look on Mom's face in it. Young, tired, but full of heart. She didn't know anyone was watching when she gave away her coat that night. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because that's who she was. And somehow, that single act of kindness came back to save her kids. Again and again. When I showed Mom the photo, she just stared at it for a while. Then she smiled. I remember that night. It was freezing, and I didn't even have gloves. Your grandma was so mad when I came home without my coat. She laughed softly, then her face turned serious. That man's name was Caleb. Caleb? I asked. See. She nodded slowly. Could be. I haven't seen him since that winter. He was kind, even when life had chewed him up. Said he used to be a teacher. Told me if he ever made it back on his feet, he'd pay the world back, one person at a time. That was the only explanation she gave. And honestly, it was enough. By the time I graduated with my nursing degree, the garage had become something bigger than I ever imagined. It wasn't just a help center anymore. It was a home base for hope. We had partnerships with local clinics, tutoring programs, even a job placement service. Emily was now a sophomore in high school, planning to go into theater. She'd come by the garage every weekend and help out, organizing supplies, helping the younger kids with homework, or just being a light for anyone who needed a smile. She was thriving. Mom's health stabilized, though her energy never quite returned to full strength. Still, she made time to bake cookies for our weekend events and sit with folks who needed someone to listen. One night, we had a winter fundraiser. It was freezing cold outside, but the garage was warm, full of food, music, and laughter. We had a raffle, a talent show, and a donation jar that filled faster than I expected. As I stood near the back, watching everyone talk and smile like we weren't all just a few steps removed from falling apart at times, I felt something shift in me. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about building something. Something lasting. After the event, as I was locking up, Emily came up beside me. Jake, she said, tugging at my sleeve, did you ever find out who C was? I shook my head. Not exactly. But maybe that's not the point. She looked at me, puzzled. Maybe it doesn't matter who helped us. Maybe what matters is who we help next. She smiled and nodded, like she understood more than her years should have allowed. A few months later, I got a call from Angela, the woman from the nonprofit who had given us the grant. There's a national conference, she said. They want you to speak. Share your story. My stomach turned at the thought. I'd never spoken to more than a classroom full of people, let alone a national audience. They want to know how someone like you kept going, she added. Someone like me. That phrase sat with me for a long time. I thought about the storage unit, about sleeping in a metal box, about Mom crying in the dark and Emily clinging to my hand during chemo. I thought about the cold nights, the unpaid bills, the kindness from strangers, the envelopes from C. And I said yes. The conference was in Chicago. Big city, bright lights. I wore the only suit I owned. It didn't fit quite right, but no one seemed to care. I stood on stage, heart pounding, lights blinding, and told our story. I didn't sugarcoat it. I talked about poverty, about fear, about watching your world fall apart piece by piece and somehow finding the strength to tape it back together. And I talked about kindness, about people who show up when it matters most, about one stranger who kept changing our lives without ever asking for anything in return. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came the applause. Loud, real. I walked off stage and into the hallway, overwhelmed. That's when a man approached me. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Late 50s maybe. Neatly dressed. Kind eyes. I just wanted to say thank you, he said. For what? For reminding me why I do what I do. I must have looked confused, because he smiled gently and added, sometimes the smallest things echo the loudest. He turned and walked away before I could ask his name. But I swear, I knew. After the conference, things moved quickly. I got invited to speak at schools, community centers, even a few city council meetings about how small efforts can ripple into big changes. I never saw myself as a speaker, but people listened. Not because I was special, but because the story was real. I made sure every time I stood behind a microphone, I told the truth, the good, the bad, and especially the ugly. Because people needed to know it was possible to crawl out of the dark, even if it wasn't easy. Back home, the Garage Turn Community Center became a model for other towns. We started getting letters from places all over the state asking how they could start something similar. Volunteers poured in, more than we could handle some weeks. And just when I thought I'd found a rhythm, life threw one last surprise my way. One night, I got a call from a woman named Linda. She worked at a local law firm. Is this Jake Porter? She asked. Yeah, who's calling? I represent the estate of a Mr. Caleb Morris. You're listed in his will. I froze. Estate? Yes. He passed a few weeks ago. Lung condition, apparently. He left a small group of beneficiaries, and you're one of them. I couldn't breathe for a second. What? Did he leave? There was a pause. Then she said, would you be able to come in next week? I think you'll want to hear it in person. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the floor, heart pounding. See, Caleb. It had to be him. The law office was in a brick building that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Wood paneling, old carpet, and a front desk with a rotary phone still hooked up. Linda met me in a small conference room and slid a folder across the table. In addition to a financial gift, Mr. Morris left a letter for you. I opened it with shaking hands. The check inside was for $50,000. I didn't even know what to think. I'd never seen that many zeros with my name on them. Then I read the letter. It was short, handwritten, clean block letters, just like the ones on those old notes. Jake, you remind me of the man I wanted to be. You gave your mom's kindness a second life. Use this to keep building, to help the next one. Thank you for giving an old soul purpose again. See, I just sat there and cried. I didn't even care who saw. Not because of the money, but because of the full circle moment. The coat in the snow, the stranger on the bench, the hospital bills, the envelopes, the photo, all of it. He had been there all along. I used the money to create a scholarship fund in his name, the Morris Grant, for kids from low-income families who wanted to work in healthcare, education, or community service. The kind of kids who grew up like Emily and me. The kind of kids who just needed a chance. We funded 7 students in the first year. One of them is already halfway through nursing school. Another is studying to become a teacher. Every fall, we hosted Day of Kindness at the garage in Caleb's honor. No speeches, no banners, just simple things. Free coats, hot meals, warm socks, a place to sit and talk. It's never been about recognition. It's about paying it forward, just like you did. One evening, years later, after Emily graduated and Mom was settled into a calmer life, we sat around the old kitchen table. The same one we'd once huddled around in the rental house with no heat. Emily said, you know, Jake, we never were cursed. I laughed. No, just broke. Mom smiled, sipping tea. Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what you really have. I looked at them and realized something. We had made it. Not because someone handed us an easy life, but because when life tried to break us, we leaned on each other. And when strangers reached out a hand, we grabbed it without shame. Because pride doesn't feed you. Pride doesn't warm your sister at night or pay hospital bills. But kindness? Kindness changes everything. One final note to anyone listening. If you've ever given a stranger a coat, helped someone you barely knew, or dropped a few dollars into a donation jar not knowing where it would go, this story is for you. Because you never know how far your kindness will travel. And sometimes, it comes back years later, with a name, a note, and a legacy you didn't even realize you left behind. Years passed. I wish I could say everything was smooth sailing after that. But life is rarely that simple. Still, we had built something strong, stronger than circumstances, stronger than fear. And most importantly, strong enough to hold others up when they needed it most. The garage became a landmark. People in the county started calling it the light post, a place where people found their way again when they'd lost direction. We never turned anyone away. Hungry? You'd get food. Cold? We had blankets. Lost your job? We'd help you fill out applications or connect you with folks who could give you a shot. I watched kids grow up in that place. Some came in quiet and guarded, barely saying a word. A few years later, they were mentoring others, cracking jokes, and planning futures they never thought possible. Emily was one of them. She didn't just survive. She became someone people looked up to. After high school, she got into a small college for performing arts on a scholarship. Her application essay was about strength, not suffering. She called me after her first performance in front of a real audience, crying tears of joy. Jake, she said, I don't feel broken anymore. And I cried too. Because I remembered every night I watched her sleep in a cold storage unit, hooked 2 and 4, fighting for her life. And now she was lighting up a stage. As for Mom, she finally got to rest. She still helped out at the center when she could, but mostly, she spent her time in her small garden, growing vegetables and making soups that could bring anyone back from a bad day. She deserved every moment of peace she got. Years later, I got a letter from a young man named Marcus. He was one of the kids who used to come to the garage every day after school. He was a shy, lanky 12-year-old when he first walked through our doors, always hungry, always silent. Now he was 22, about to graduate from a university out of state. He wrote, I don't think you remember me. I used to take the peanut butter sandwiches you left on the counter. But it wasn't just the food. You made me feel safe. No one ever made me feel like that before. I want you to know I got accepted to medical school. Because of you. I sat at my desk for a long time after reading that. Not because I was proud, though I was, but because it reminded me of something I once read in Caleb's journal. We don't fix people. We simply hand them the tools to fix themselves. That was it. That was everything. I never did find out if Caleb had family. No one came forward to claim the rest of his estate. But in a way, I think he left it all to us, not just in dollars, but in what he taught us through his quiet generosity. Some folks chase big legacies, buildings with their names on them, awards, speeches. But Caleb? He passed on something better. A spark. One that kept lighting fires in the coldest places. Now, every December 3rd, the night we first moved into that storage unit, we hold a candlelight vigil outside the garage. Not to remember the hard times, but to celebrate the journey. We line the sidewalk with paper lanterns, each one carrying a name. Someone who helped, someone who made it out, someone who's still fighting. And in the center, we place a single coat, hung on a wooden post, lit softly from above. A coat, just like the one my mom gave away all those years ago. A simple reminder that hope doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, wrapped in fleece, handed over by someone who just wanted you to stay warm for one more night. So if you're watching this, or listening, or maybe you're sitting in your car unsure where you're going next, this is my message to you. Keep going. You have no idea who you'll inspire, or how far your light might reach. Even in the darkest night, someone out there is still carrying a flame. And that might just save someone's life.